Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to look at the world a little differently. We're putting on a new pair of glasses, sociological glasses, if you will, and they're going to reveal the hidden patterns and invisible forces that shape, well, pretty much everything around us. So let's just dive right in with a question that I think we've all asked ourselves at some point. Why is my life the way it is? Why these specific opportunities? Why these beliefs? Why these challenges? It turns out sociology gives us an incredibly powerful toolkit for finding the answers. You see, the simple truth is our personal stories, they never, ever happen in a vacuum. The sociologist C. Wright Mills, he gave this idea a name, the sociological imagination. It's really the skill of connecting our own private lives to the much bigger social forces at play. It's about seeing how our personal troubles are so often linked to wider public issues. To really get a handle on this, let's start small. Let's zoom way in on the individual, what we'll call the micro view, and ask a pretty fundamental question. How do we actually become who we are? Okay, think about this for a second, because it's kind of wild. According to the sociologist George Herbert Mead, you weren't born with a self. Nope. Instead, your identity is built piece by tiny piece through every single social interaction you have. We basically learn who we are by seeing ourselves reflected in the eyes of everyone around us. I mean, this just flips the whole idea of identity on its head, right? It's not something that just bubbles up from within. It's something we absorb from the outside in. We literally internalize the culture, the rules, the values of our family, our friends, our community. Our social world is actively building us. And if you want to see the power of society in its most extreme form, just look at the work of Erving Goffman. He studied what he called total institutions, places like prisons or military boot camps. And he showed how these incredibly controlled environments can systematically break down a person's old identity and build a brand new, compliant one. It is a really stark reminder of just how deeply our sense of self is tied to our surroundings. Okay, so that's the micro view, looking from the individual up. Now let's pull the camera way, way back. Let's zoom out to the macro view, to those massive, often invisible social forces that shape us from the top down. For Karl Marx, the single most powerful force in all of human history was the economy. He argued that if you really want to understand any society, you have to look at the struggle between social classes, which, boiled down, is the conflict between the people who own everything and the people who have to sell their labor just to survive. But is it only about money? Well, Max Weber thought it was a bit more complicated than that. He totally agreed that economic class was huge, but he said, hang on, there are two other key factors: social status, things like prestige and respect, and political power. And this really helps explain why, someone can have a ton of influence, but not necessarily be super rich. Have you ever felt completely at ease in one place, but then in another situation you feel like a total fish out of water? Well, the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu gave a name to that feeling: habitus. It's like this social instinct, all the ingrained tastes, manners, and ways of carrying yourself that you just absorb from your social class. It's what tells you, without you even thinking about it, how to fit in. Of course, beyond class, there are other powerful structures that divide our world. The pioneering American sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois made this profound declaration that the central problem of the 20th century was race, what he called the color line. He identified it as this fundamental structure that creates deep and lasting inequality. And in a similar way, feminist sociologist Sylvia Walby uses the concept of patriarchy to help us understand gender inequality. Now, this isn't about blaming individual men, not at all. It's about recognizing a deep-rooted system of social structures, everything from the family to the government, that has, for a very long time, privileged men and masculinity. So here's the bottom line for this whole section. Class, race, patriarchy, these are not just theories in a dusty old book. They are the invisible architecture of our society. They open some doors and they slam others shut, guiding our lives in ways we often don't even see. So this is all fascinating, but how can we use this sociological lens to make sense of the world we're living in right now? Let's try and apply it to a few features of modern life. Let's take life in a big city. Over a century ago, George Simmel noticed that to cope with the constant chaos and stimulation of city life, people developed this reserved, almost indifferent attitude. But then Jane Jacobs came along and saw it totally differently.
She argued that the best, safest cities aren't anonymous at all. They actually rely on a ballet of the sidewalk, where all the local residents and shopkeepers become the natural eyes on the street. Now, here is a concept you are going to start seeing absolutely everywhere: McDonaldization. George Ritzer came up with this term to describe how our society is being organized more and more like a fast food chain. Everything is optimized for efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control. And we see it everywhere, in our schools, our hospitals, even online dating. It's this powerful force for convenience that can sometimes, well, strip away all the human nuance. And finally, does it ever just feel like nothing is stable anymore? Zygmunt Bauman captured this feeling perfectly with his term liquid modernity. He argued that in our time, everything, our careers, our relationships, even our own identities, is in constant flux. The solid, lifelong structures of the past have kind of melted away, leaving us in this state of permanent uncertainty. Okay, so we've zoomed in on the self. We've zoomed way out to society. What does it all mean when you put it back together? What's the real power of this new sociological lens? It really comes down to this. Sociology gives us a brand new way of seeing. It's the ability to connect our own personal stories to the grand sweep of history and these huge social structures. In a way, it really is a kind of superpower for understanding why things are the way they are. Pierre Bourdieu captured the mission of sociology perfectly with this. Its entire purpose is to pull back the curtain. It takes the things we just assume are normal or natural, and it makes them seem strange again, revealing the hidden machinery that's running our world just beneath the surface. And that really leaves us with a challenge for you. Now that you have this sociological lens, what are you going to see differently? Look around you, at your job, in your community, in your own life. What hidden forces will you now see shaping your world?